determine personal jurisdiction, which is what we were doing last week, typically you will first do a statutory analysis. You're going to see if the long-arm statute applies to your client's claim. Then you're going to do the constitutional analysis, which again is just saying, is it fair for Kentucky to force an Ohio resident to come? And do you determine if that's fair by whether or not there is specific jurisdiction, general jurisdiction, quasi-in rem, or tag jurisdiction? But that's essentially what you're doing. It's no more complicated than that. Any questions about what I just said? Please ask. All right, let's rock and roll then. So today, I think, did I pass out the, I did. So today we're going to discuss diversity jurisdiction. So yesterday, you remember, we discussed federal question jurisdiction, which involved section 1331, which again just says that you can file a case in federal court if it deals with a federal statute like Title VII or the First Amendment, a constitutional issue, or a treaty, right? So those three things say yes, you can file a case in federal court. And that's under federal question. Today we're discussing the second way you can get a case filed in federal court, or it allows you to file the case in federal court, and that's diversity jurisdiction. Excuse me. So the constitutional basis for diversity jurisdiction is found, we're back to Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution, and it basically provides that the judicial power of the United States shall extend to controversies between citizens of a different state. So again, essentially what it's saying is that the judicial reach federal power can listen to cases involving citizens of different states. So the plaintiff and the defendant reside in different states, okay? Their residents are domiciled in different states. So again, Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution provides that the judicial power of the United States shall extend to controversies between citizens of different states. So just like with federal question jurisdiction, although the constitutional basis for that gives the federal courts power over these types of cases, there's also a statute that's created as well, and it's 1332, which makes sense. So 1331 is the statute that applies for federal question. 1332 is the statute that applies for diversity jurisdiction. If you Google those two numbers, 1331 civil procedure, it will come up, and you can see the exact reading of that particular statute. Excuse me. And so what the statute does, it gives a little bit more definition in terms of what is required for diversity jurisdiction. So 1332A1 essentially says district courts, and I'm reading directly from the statute, shall have original jurisdiction of all civil actions where the matter in controversy exceeds the sum or value of $75,000 and the controversy is between citizens of different states. So again, 1332A is an Apple 1 of the U.S. Code states that district courts shall have original jurisdiction of all civil actions where the matter in controversy exceeds the sum or value of $75,000 and, not or, and the controversy is between citizens of different states. Super easy, we like this. Super clear. All right. So essentially all that's saying for diversity jurisdiction is plaintiff versus defendant. So plaintiff is a resident of Kentucky. Defendant is a resident of Ohio. And the claim, the plaintiff is saying in damages they have is $80,000. So it's over 75,000. So those are the only two requirements. So we've got diversity of citizenship, plus amount in controversy. Must be, I haven't done math in a while, greater than, forgot how to do it.
Alligator.
Is it that way?
Yes.
All right, it's been a while. We don't really have to do math anymore. So it's just those two requirements. Sorry, does this screen block you all? Sometimes I try to make it lay down. Other times, they don't, people don't like when I do that. Okay. Black would be maybe easier. Let's see. Okay, we'll do black next time. Okay, so you asked yesterday about what if there's two defendants and they're residents of the different states. So that is the complete diversity rule that she was asking about yesterday. So essentially, federal jurisdiction requires, diversity jurisdiction requires complete diversity between all plaintiffs and all defendants. In other words, no plaintiff may be from the same state as any defendant, right? And so essentially what the rule means is that every plaintiff must be of a diverse citizenship of every defendant. So parties on the same side of the dispute can be co-citizens, so you can have two plaintiffs from the same state, two defendants from the same state. It just means that every party, meaning plaintiff and defendant, must be diverse from each other. So essentially, how it works is, if you have, so we're going to call this complete diversity rule. So we have plaintiff 1, plaintiff 2, sue defendant 1, defendant 2, and defendant 3. Awesome. So plaintiff 1 is from Kentucky, plaintiff 2 is from Ohio, defendant number 1 is from Indiana, defendant number 2 is from Indiana, defendant number 3 is from Ohio. So there's no complete diversity here because we have two parties, plaintiff number 2 and defendant number 3 are both citizens of Ohio. So the easiest way to remember, and it sounds very like kindergartenish, but this is how I remembered when I was in law school, is no one on either side of the V can be citizens of the same state. And they kind of make this super easy. Otherwise, it's like overly complicated. It's not that serious. Again, if these people were both Kentucky residents, then we would have complete diversity. It doesn't matter if the co-parties, meaning if two plaintiffs or two defendants are citizens of the same state. It just matters if, again, a plaintiff or defendant is a citizen of the same state. So what that means is for diversity jurisdiction purposes, you have two requirements. The first is that the parties have to be of different citizenship, right? So if you don't have complete diversity, you cannot use diversity jurisdiction. Even if the amount in controversy is over $75,000, you can't file your case in federal court. You have to go to state court. So in order for diversity jurisdiction to be your pathway to filing your case in federal court, you have to have complete diversity, and the amount in controversy has to be over $75,000. All right, cool. So I want to talk briefly about some of the different sections, 1332, diversity jurisdiction, before we talk about the Redner and the Hertz case. So 1332A tells us how you determine citizenship. And there's basically 7 categories. We're not going to cover them all in CivPro 1. But I just want you to know, again, for future purposes, if you don't take Advanced CivPro, that it's spelled out in the statute how, for instance, you determine citizenship for individuals? How do you determine citizenship for corporations? How do you determine citizenships for alien residents? How you determine citizenships for partnerships, for example. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. What's important for you to know for Civ Pro 1 is how you determine citizenship for individuals. And we've kind of already covered that, but you can see there's sometimes overlap. So for individuals, based on 1332A as an apple, citizenship for federal diversity purposes is a party's domicile, right? A domicile is a person's fixed place of abode, is how it's described, coupled with an intention to remain indefinitely. So a person's domicile is their fixed place of abode, coupled with where they intend to remain indefinitely. And you try to, as we saw from our practice assessment, you try to make that argument based on the facts. What's important to remind you is that a person can only have one domicile, but they can have multiple residences, like me. So you can have more than one residence, but you can only have one domicile. And again, the difference between resident and domicile is the domicile is where you intend to remain indefinitely. And we know that can get complicated, like I said, people that are bi-coastal, commuters. I live in New York, my partner lives in New Jersey, and we commute, and we have residents in both places. It can get complicated, but that's for the judge to decide, not us. It's important for us to know the rule of law and make the argument that's beneficial to our client. And so, alien residents, it's important for you to know, basically, aliens that are admitted to the U.S. with a permanent resident status are deemed to be citizens of the states where they're domiciled. So even if they necessarily aren't U.S. citizens, whatever state they're domiciled is considered to be their place of residency. I mentioned in the last class, corporations, unlike people, can have two domiciles, right? Or what we call dual citizenship. Where they're incorporated is one place where they can be considered a citizen, or two, where their principal place of business is, where their major operations are. And so for corporations, that's great, so you can sue in a federal court either where they're incorporated or where their principal place of business is. So that's a good thing. We saw from one case, the legal representative, oh, sorry, yes.
For the complete diversity rule and for corporation, and they have two, so either one of those residents can't be the same as the plaintiff.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand your question. So for the complete diversity rule for corporations, and what was the last half?
And for their two states of domicile, neither one of those can match the plaintiff.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Did you all understand her question? Okay, just making sure. All right. Legal representative of a decedent's estates. Okay, legal representative of a decedent's estate. So someone has passed away. You're representing their estate, like the poor Amazon plane that just crashed, and I believe the pilot didn't make it. And you're representing his estate and suing Amazon because the plane was defective. Then the legal representative of a decedent's estate is deemed to be a citizen of the same state as the pilot, the decedent, for diversity purposes, okay? The person they're representing. And then last but not least, what's important for you to know for Civil Procedure 1 is that the legal representative of infants or someone that's incompetent, someone that, for instance, has been legally classified as, I'm trying to think of the politically correct way of saying that. I guess incompetent. I don't know how to say that nicely. That essentially they're a citizen of the, a legal representative of an infant or incompetent is deemed to be a citizen only of the same state as the infant or incompetent. So it's just like the decedent, whoever you're representing, whatever their particular residence is, which makes sense, is the citizenship for diversity purposes. Okay, so whoever you're representing, even if they're incompetent or an infant, so it's not the parent, it's where the child, which typically would be where the parent lives, but you know there's exceptions to that these days. So the person that you're representing. In terms of the amount in controversy, we've already covered that. It must exceed $75,000. And I'm gonna leave it at that. In Civ Pro 2, it does get a little more complicated. You can aggregate claims, so like the plaintiff can have two claims, one claim for medical malpractice, that's for $30,000, and another claim for their injuries, that's $50,000. They can combine or aggregate those claims to meet that $75,000. But there's multiple rules. That's like a very simplistic way of explaining it, but it gets real complicated. But I do want you to know that you can combine claims. I'm not going to test you on that because it's Civ Pro 2 that John Cross covers. But you can, a plaintiff can combine multiple claims to meet that $75,000 in controversy. I also want to make sure I emphasize that the $75,000 in controversy, as long as it's a good faith effort that the plaintiff is making, that they believe their claims will be in excess of $75,000, they're okay. But what if they go to court and it was pretty obvious that it was a stretch that the claims were going to be $75,000, and say the plaintiff wins, but the claim really only ended up being $40,000. The federal judge or court will decide whether or not they want to punish the plaintiff, because they have this option in place to punish the plaintiff because they don't want people exacerbating or overinflating the amount in controversy just to get their case in federal court, because they think they're going to have a more favorable outcome. So if the judge finds that the plaintiff over-exaggerated their claim to get their case in federal court, they can force the plaintiff to have to pay for the defendants, for example, their attorney's costs. So there are some rules in place to discourage people from lying essentially about this amount in controversy just to get their case in federal court. But again, as long as you make a good faith effort, and you can't just say, oh, I want it's going to be $76,000. You know, you have to show, like if it's an auto injury, evidentiary basis. You show this is the amount from the auto repair shop that shows the amount of damages, like 2 different quotes to fix my car. These are a copy of my medical bills. It's just that when you start trying to use like pain and suffering, those kind of subjective, cushiony terms where the judge will kind of look at you a little side eye. But as long as you have evidence to support the amount of controversy, even if you don't get that total amount, you're pretty much okay. All right. Any questions about diversity jurisdiction or federal question before we discuss the Redner case? All right. So, yay. All right, Redner, we need an attorney for the day. Pretty simple case. So little to choose from now. Attorney. Oh, I hate picking names. Blue, where art thou? All right, yay. Attorney Blue, and Attorney. Have I called on you already, Attorney Carolus?
Carolus? He's not here.
He's not here. All right. What about Rife?
I could go ahead and go. You just called on me yesterday, and I wasn't prepared.
Yeah, but it's okay.
Oh, well, okay.
You had a legitimate reason. Remind me your last name.
McCard.
It's Erica or Madison?
Bailey. Bailey. It's Madison on there, but I go by
Oh
Bailey.
yeah, you did say that, Bailey. All right, let's get rocking and rolling. So, the issue in this particular case, the Redner case, is whether diversity jurisdiction exists. Either attorney, what is the plaintiff contending in its complaint? What are they arguing?
They're arguing for diversity of jurisdiction, and the plaintiff is a citizen of the
Excellent, excellent. So we know the plaintiff is seeking to invoke section 1332A2, meaning citizens of a state and citizens or subjects of a foreign state. And the alternative the plaintiff sought, again, was to invoke 1332A1. They're saying we're citizens of different states. So Attorney Blue, where do the parties reside in this case? Where is the plaintiff a citizen of where?
He asserts that he is a citizen of California, but he's residing in France. He's not actually a French citizen. And then the defendant is a corporation. Its principal place of business is in New York.
Awesome, great job. So I have to be honest with you. When you didn't jump in when I asked the first question and you looked down, I was like, oh no, he's not prepared, and I still don't want to be a jerk today, but you totally are prepared, and I'm happy about that. All right, so the parties, this is kind of interesting case, okay? Where do they reside? Plaintiff, as he said, I'm just saying it louder from the other side, is a citizen of the U.S., he says, but he's residing in France. Interesting. The two individual defendants are residents of the state of New York, and then we have the corporate defendant has their principal place of business in New York. So what are the plaintiff's contacts? Attorney, I still don't want to butcher your name.
It's McCard.
McCard?
But it's fine, you don't have to use it.
No, you should. No, you should. McCard. You should make people say your name right. All right. Where are you from originally?
Southeastern Kentucky, Harlan County.
Harlan County. Okay. Make them say your name right. All right. What are the plaintiff's contacts with the state of California, please?
So he was raised and educated in California. He has a California law license. He has a law office, which he visits at least 4 times a year. He has a California driver's license. He's solicited business there. I think it said 2 times. And he has not given up the idea of returning to California, and he considers it as his domicile.
Okay, so it sounds like me, right? He's kind of being shady. Remember, I was like, oh, I don't live in Kentucky. I got an Illinois license up until last month. He's really trying to fight, apparently, this case being filed in federal court. I don't know how successful he's going to be with this. A lot of contacts in California. So the court goes on to talk about what's required for jurisdiction under 1332A2, meaning when you have a U.S. citizen and a foreign citizen. And the court essentially says what, and take your time, Attorney Blue, about that although the defendants are citizens of the state of New York, for jurisdictional purposes, what do they say we should look at?
It basically says that what the plaintiff was saying was this factual submission, and said it's not sufficient to demonstrate a California domicile, and it says it lacks the details about what is living in France as involved. And then, are you like asking what like the court said that we should look at?
Nope, that's perfect. What you said is great. All right, so court says although the defendants, again, are citizens of the state of New York, for jurisdiction to exist under 1332A2, plaintiff would need to be a citizen of a foreign state, not merely a resident, and the complaint itself alleges the plaintiff is a citizen of the U.S., so the plaintiff basically would need to be a citizen of France and not reside there. And he's saying he's a citizen of France, but really he's a U.S. citizen, right? So the court then goes on to talk about subsection 13A1. And this section would allow a citizen, of California to invoke jurisdiction, diversity jurisdiction, in a suit against a citizen of New York, which makes sense. A person is a citizen of a state of the U.S., again, if he's a citizen of the U.S., and domiciled in the state in question. So again, he needed to be domiciled there. So basically, the plaintiff would need to be domiciled in California, again, not just visiting there, or it can't just be their residence. So remember I said that a domicile is a person's fixed place of abode, coupled with the intent to remain there indefinitely. A person, again, can only have one domicile, but can have multiple residences. So essentially the court, in this case, holding and reasoning was what Attorney McCard. See, I said it right.
They dismissed the case, and they said that
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so the court says, in this case, that the plaintiff's factual submission is not sufficient, right, to demonstrate a California domicile or that the plaintiff is a citizen of France. So basically they said both sections of 1332A1 and 1332A2 are not available. He failed on both accounts. They said the plaintiff's affidavit is entirely lacking in information about exactly where he lives, right? What kind of resident he has, whether he has any family in France, or what activities he does in France, despite the discussion of the domicile of the plaintiff's complaint. So the plaintiff is not explicitly stating that there is jurisdiction on the basis of a California domicile. And so the court, as she said, dismisses the case for lack of subject matter jurisdiction, but what's important is they dismiss it without prejudice. And so if you ever see that in a case where they say without prejudice, it just means, look, you picked the wrong court, you can go file the same case again in the correct court. If they dismiss it with prejudice, it means too bad, too sad, you cannot file the case again. Okay, so when you see without prejudice, they're basically just kind of giving you a little smack on the hand and say you need to pick the right court. So that's a good thing. So what's important about this case is just remembering the importance of A, having complete diversity, B, how domicile is determined based on section 1332. When you're bored over the weekend, if you want to Google 1332, I mean, it's great. So when you're out in practice, you just say, oh, I need to see there's diversity jurisdiction. It's in a, someone that's incompetent and a foreigner. You're just going to look at that section. It's going to specifically spell out for you, this is what's required. You look at your case facts that the partner gave you, and you're going to tell the partner, yes, we have diversity jurisdiction. We can file this case in federal court, or no, we cannot. For exam purposes, again, I don't care about Section A2 and all that nonsense. I care about, do you know these two things? Do you know what diversity jurisdiction is? Do you know what the amount of controversy should be? Do you know what complete diversity is? When you take Advanced Civ Pro, they're going to be a little bit more anal, but they'll also let you use your supplement because as attorneys, that's what you do. So it's a waste of my time to have you memorize subparts when it's just dumb when you have the book when you're in practice. But I do need you to know where to look in the book. So I need you to know, okay, I don't know if it's 1332 A, B, C, but I know to go to 1332 for diversity jurisdiction. I know to go to 1331 for federal question. So as we get closer to exam time, I'll remind you of which one of these codes are important for you to know. But just remember for now, for outlining purposes, I mean, you can, but you don't have to put all those subparts. So if
Question.
later on have a chance to look at, oh, sorry, I did not see the questions. I'm gonna have your hand up first. Okay, let's just start here and go down the aisle that way.
Okay, so is this guy in complete limbo as far as for like the ability to file under diversity jurisdiction? Because he
No, you can just file in state court.
well, but he can't do it in federal under.
So you're not being, I mean, it's not like you can't get your case decided, you just can't do it in federal court. Courts have limited jurisdiction.
So had he just like failed to mention that he was currently living in France and just submitted all that stuff that he like, because he obviously lived in California at one time and he's not a French citizen.
Yeah, so he could have just not mentioned that France stuff, right? But then the defendant could have made the argument, if they did their due diligence, no, actually he's in France, that's his abode, meaning his domicile, his intent to remain indefinitely. He has these things where he's accepted a job there, he's married, he has a family there, he files his taxes so you still can challenge if they want it in state court, the other side can still say, oh, no, there's no subject matter jurisdiction. But he would have been better off doing that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Great question. Yes.
Okay, so does this mean that a person can be a citizen of the United States but not be a citizen of any state? Because they're saying you're a citizen of this state if you are a citizen of the U.S. and domiciled in that state.
Yeah, so those are two different things. So, yes, you can be a citizen of the United States, but not domiciled in one of the 50 states because you're living abroad and that's where you intend to remain indefinitely.
So is he not a citizen of any specific state then? If he's not a citizen of California, it's the only place he has contacts with?
for diversity jurisdiction purposes, no, he's not.
Okay, but then for other just general.
Yeah, he's still a citizen, yeah, so he still, can enjoy all the benefits we do, like a passport, trying to think of it, so he's fine. It's just for deciding if you can have, where you can file your case. It doesn't affect your real citizenship.
Okay.
Domicile doesn't.
Alright, so if he were gonna file in state court, he would then have to file in New York?
Correct.
For both units work, okay.
Mhm. Great question. Yes.
So, this case doesn't really mention the $75,000.
Mhm.
If we receive a fact pattern that does not mention it, do we assume that that's already been met?
Yes, but you shouldn't. It's just this abbreviated case. But yes, so she said if you don't see the amount in controversy, do you assume that it's been met? And the answer is yes. It's just that they're just focusing on, it's just the full opinions are very long, but yes. But if there wasn't, they would have challenged it in here. And so the idea is if someone's trying to make you file your case in federal court, you're going to try to get it kicked out by challenging subject matter jurisdiction. I say I'm domiciled in Illinois, you're like bullcrap, she's domiciled in Kentucky, because the plaintiff is domiciled in Illinois as well, so then we won't have complete diversity, and you want the case in federal court. So, and again, I mentioned in the last class, the reason you want the case in federal court typically is because you think you're going to have a better advantage in the outcome of your case. And so it's interesting when you think about from when you file your case, how many things you have to get past to not have it dismissed or thrown out. Personal, the person is challenging, I motion to dismiss for lack of personal jurisdiction. Your Honor, they picked the wrong venue. Indiana's a more convenient venue. I motion to dismiss for, improper venue. Or I want to transfer. I want it in another court. So it shows how solid the plaintiff's initial complaint has to be to withstand all those challenges that the defense might make to try to make you try the case in a different court system, in a different location of the state, a different venue. So there's a lot of twists and turns. So you want to do a very, very solid, good complaint. Because every time you refile the case, you have to absorb the cost because your client isn't going to pay for it. It's just not a good use of your time. All right, let's move forward. The Hertz case. So before we get into the facts of the Hertz case, our last case for the day, yay! What was the issue in this case? Essentially, it's whether Hertz Corporation had a principal place of business in California. The court is telling us which standard to use to make that determination for diversity purposes. So this is a great case because before this, it was really hard trying to figure out where your principal place of business is. So your J.P. Chase?
Yes.
Morgan, right?
JP Morgan.
J.P. Morgan, thank you. So Jamie Dimon, I think he's still their CEO, whatever. So he's based in New York. But they have a huge office in Chicago, in LA, and so it can get a little complicated sometimes with these mega corporations trying to figure out where their principal place of business is. Even Amazon, I think they pulled out of New York, didn't they?
They just
Yeah.
did.
Out of Queens.
Like within a week.
Can they come to Louisville and give us all those
We
jobs?
don't want that.
Why? You get same day packages, like you can order, if you order before noon, it's.
Gross.
We're even looking at Atlanta.
I don't need the.
Ryan, they'll use scooters for
Are
delivery.
you anti-Amazon?
Huh? I'm sorry?
Who said the scooter show?
Yes, I am.
Why?
I think it destroys like local business and the character of cities. Like Queens was smart to kick them out. Like we don't want Amazon around.
They keep taking my money.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be honest about Amazon. So I actually agree with him, and I struggle because sometimes you go for the glitter, and to me it's like so convenient to sit up in my couch and order stuff, and have it brought to my door, or even put in the trunk of my car while I'm in here teaching you. Like that's really freaking cool. But I do see when my parents live in Bloomington, Illinois, that so many people are doing online shopping that both malls have shut down, the brick and mortar. So they have no mall. I'm like, how could you live here like you don't have a mall? Like that's strange. Like I think of high school kids used to hang out at the mall, go watch, go see a movie, walk around, and just not be home, and there's no mall, and you know, all of the Macy's, everything just closed, and everyone says, oh, so big, I order online. So there is concern to me because those are jobs that are being lost. When I see the airport, I do think it's cool that I can hurry up when I'm in a hurry and use one of those machines, but I also know that those machines used to be employees, that now they don't have to pay health insurance on, you know, they're able to cut costs, and so my concern is in a bigger picture, although I love the glitz and glamour of Amazon and the convenience of the touchscreen kiosk at the airport, I keep thinking eventually, like so many of our lower level jobs, our blue collar jobs, our unskilled jobs are not going to be available, that more people are gonna be relying on social services, and we're gonna just totally tank and belly over, meaning be too bottom heavy. And I don't know, I just feel like there's gonna be it's gonna be really bad. And then you go back to the whole socialist, everybody gets their even share, which my husband and I argue about that all the time. I just kind of mess with him for fun, because he says, what motivation would you have, you know, to try, if you know you're gonna get the set amount of money why am I gonna try to excel or create something new, who cares, what's gonna motivate me? That's how who?
The Soviet Union
Yeah.
fell because no offense to anyone has family or who is a cleaning custodian, a janitor was getting the exact same amount as a dentist. And the dentists were sitting there thinking, well, why should I do anything?
Why bother? But then, maybe for the greater good, that's why everybody gets their fair share. So, the point is, I don't know how our current capitalist system is gonna withstand if we, you know, because we keep outsourcing. Look how many like when we call the airlines, it's people in another country, which is fine, but I'm like, there's so many unemployed people here, but they're not skilled. State Farm, where my dad retired from their corporate office, he said half of his department, they outsource the work from India because they honestly couldn't find enough skilled workers in the U.S. in that region, and it was just easier to bring people in. And so I just worry about that. So Amazon does concern me, and like Walmart, because I do like the local. Like I refuse to go to Starbucks just because, I mean, it's overwhelming. Like I almost told you my coffee shop, caught myself. You don't need to see what I look like outside, that's really but yeah, so I try to just do the local, so I get it. But what do we do? Like, it is convenient, but then are we compromising our culture and value for convenience? Dimitri, because you haven't had a chance.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if you can stop it, really. They said, like, in 20 years, 40% of jobs right now will be displaced by, I was watching 60 Minutes, and that's why I brought up when I forgot what the case was, International Shoe, because you don't need that salesman that's displaying shoes. You just put it on the internet, and somebody in Washington can buy it from Delaware, kind of like you do. So that you see that job, and it's cool just to look back and see how jobs have been taken over. I mean, not cool, but
it's
taken over by the
yes.
internet.
Well, and poverty is a big issue with it too, because if you can't afford to go anywhere except for the people that are doing that, you have to sacrifice your morals in order to survive.
Yeah. Oh, it's bad. I'm just wondering where we're going. Yes, do you have the answer?
No, but we'll get the jobs from somewhere. What happened to all the milk deliverers, the people that delivered ice, the telegraph workers, the telegram workers?
Yeah.
Somehow it just takes
They
care of
found
itself.
jobs. Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
because then they had because you only need a high school diploma to be an air traffic controller. So that's very optimistic. He's saying other jobs will start to come into play. I just wonder. Oh well, so we'll see 20 years from now. Yes.
I mean, kind of from the historical perspective, because that's what it was about.
Let's be respectful. Hold on. Go ahead.
From a historical perspective, this has always been happening. You're always
That's what he's saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just even look at a separate technological revolution that was in the 1800s, 1700s with the Industrial Revolution. Entire families went bankrupt, poor, and hungry because they had a very specific type of skill set. They had to either learn, it's always been adapt or die. It's just never been as jarring as it is now, because usually you always had to have someone who at least monitored the machine. And the machines want to know machines, and welcome to Skynet.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so we'll move on, but,
Hopefully it works out.
just because there's like a lot of pushback here for online classes because some of the older faculty feel like, I don't want to learn how to do that. And they feel like it jeopardizes their jobs because they don't have the technological skills to do it and they don't want to learn it. But I also, I know I'm going to be a hologram one day. I get it. For real, why not? I really am. They had a hologram at the Boston airport, and I'm serious. I thought it was a TSA person that was telling you, make sure you don't have liquids. And as I got closer, I did my hand like that. And I was like, oh my God, it's a hologram. But why couldn't you create a hologram that just anticipates, we've taught enough, we know what questions for the most part people are going to ask. And you just respond to the questions, a hologram.
What were the results of that survey?
Yes, they were, actually, you know what, if you send me an email, I'll send the PDF around. But it ended up being 67% in support of the online classes. The vote was to increase the number of online offerings. The faculty did vote yes for seminars. So you all will benefit if you choose to. You're not required to take them, but you can take additional classes in the summer, or half of your classes during the school year can be online. So they voted yes. But this class, 67%, you kind of were the deciders for the whole school, but don't tell anybody. No pressure. Yeah. Because none of the other faculty surveyed their students, so just move. It's the truth. Played hardball. All right. So the facts in this case, we know we have a class action suit. Hertz employees in California allege that Hertz violated California's wage and hour law, essentially. Hertz, the defendant, what they're trying to do in this case is they sought to remove the case to federal court, invoking diversity jurisdiction. So we haven't covered removal yet. But essentially, if you think if the plaintiff files a case in state court and you think it should be in federal court, it's just kind of like transfer. You can say, Your Honor, I make a motion to have the court move from this court system to another. So from state court to federal court. We'll spend a class covering that, but that's the quick and down and dirty version. So what did the employees argue in this case, either Attorney McCarg or Attorney Blue? Why did they not want the case transferred?
The plaintiffs did not want the case transferred, I guess because that is where they were, and they insisted that Hertz was a citizen of California because the company derived more revenue from that state than any other, and most of its business activities also occurred there. So that was the rule that the Ninth Circuit was kind of following.
Excellent. Yes, so they're saying, hey, wait a minute. We don't want this case transferred to federal court. California is the principal place of business of Hertz. She gave 2 examples as to why. They derive most of their revenue from the state of California, then all the other states. Their Hertz business occurred in California, and therefore they're a citizen of California. So they're like, hey, that destroys diversity. There's no diversity of citizenship. The case has to stay in state court. We don't want it in federal court. There's no diversity jurisdiction. So the district court concluded that it lacked diversity jurisdiction. They agreed, right, with the defendants, because Hertz was a California citizen under the Ninth Circuit precedent, which asked, so basically the Ninth Circuit had an existing rule that said whether the amount of the corporation's business activity is significantly larger or substantially predominates in one state. That's how you determine. That was the Ninth Circuit rule. So if you're trying to determine a corporation's citizenship, the Ninth Circuit said what you look at is where they have the significant portion of their business, where whatever state they substantially predominate in terms of their presence. So the district court held that California, again, was Hertz's principal place of business, therefore no diversity jurisdiction, right? So what is the rule set forth in this case, which is why we read this case, on how to determine a corporation's principal place of business? I believe it is located did not write the page number down. but it tells you somewhere in the case, Attorney Blue, thanks. I thought I wrote the page number down.
The Supreme Court said that it was based on the principal place of business, and it's best read when you refer to it as where a corporation's officers direct, control, and coordinate the corporation's activities.
Excellent. So that makes sense, right? You look at where are the corporation's high-level officers? Where do they coordinate the corporation's activities? Where's their hub, right? They call it the nerve center test, okay? The control center. So the nerve center test says that the nerve center of the corporation will typically be found where the corporation's headquarters or principal place of business, as long as it's labeled as a headquarters and not simply an office, for instance, where the corporation holds its board meeting. So again, for factual purposes, you're going to look at, okay, you're going to make an argument that their high-level officers are located in Ohio. The supervisors report to upper-level people that are in Ohio. They coordinate the corporation's activities from Ohio, all their initiatives. So those are the things that you look for. It's not a perfect test, but it's giving you some factors to look for when it's not clear where a company's principal place of business is because they have several offices. That's why I mentioned earlier Jamie Dimon. You're going to look at where's the CEO located, because typically he or she is in charge, and that's going to be where their higher level officers are directing things from. Whoever's the head, the top dog. Where's Trump at, right? Some of the reasons the court gives for adopting this approach instead of the Ninth Circuit approach, they said basically they looked at the language of Section 1332A1, and they said, if you look at the legislative language, we think it supports this approach, that the principal place of business can only be one place. The statute doesn't in any way suggest that Congress intended to allow a corporation to have more than one principal place of business. They also said that they think adopting this new test promotes administrative simplicity. In contrast to having, these multifaceted tests. They said we don't want to make this overly complicated. Again, look at where the higher level officers are, where they're directing activities from, where the CEO is, etc. And then lastly, the rationale the court gave for adopting this more simplistic test, meaning the nerve center test, is simply they said if you look at the legislative history of Section 1332, it indicates that there's a preference for a test, again, that's not complex, and again, Congress was very clear on not wanting to make this overly complicated. The court then goes on to recognize some of the potential issues with the nerve center test. So they acknowledge, yes, it has some limitations, right? But they say the benefits outweigh the problems. We want to, again, avoiding choosing simplicity over a more complex test. So with respect to the holding, unfortunately your textbook edits out the holding, which they usually don't do that, of the case. But just so you know, the Supreme Court eventually reverses the District Court and the Ninth Circuit and held that based on the facts submitted by the Hertz Corporation, that Hertz's center of direction, control, and coordination, its nerve center and headquarters were located in New Jersey and not California, okay? So there is diversity, subject matter, jurisdiction for the claim to be heard and removed to federal court. So that's what the court essentially held. So the important point to take away from this particular case is the test regarding how you determine where a corporation's principal place of business is for diversity purposes, and that is simply the nerve center test. Super simple, clear. We like this class because the rules are like right there. You don't have to go and search. I mean, it's great. Got the minimum contacts test, got the nerve center test. We like this. Substantial contacts for general jurisdiction. You should be the first class to get all A's. There's no limits. It doesn't hurt me at all. It just makes me look really good. It does, actually. I'd be like, yeah, my class killed the exam. You guys are suckers. So, does anybody have any questions about diversity jurisdiction? Yes.
So what do you do in a situation where the plaintiff is the same place of domicile as like the principal place of business of a corporation or.
Where they
where
destroy
they
diversity
incorporate.
jurisdiction, you have no choice but to file in state court.
Okay.
Yeah, sucks. But again, it's not denying you an opportunity to hear your case, just denying you in the most favorable, potentially the most favorable form. So that's the fall guy. Great question. Is your hand up? No, you're just doing this little wave, pageant wave. Anybody else? I didn't say your name, so they don't know who you are. I'm not gonna look at you, so they won't know who I was talking to. All right, 'cause I know you guys watch my eyes. Are we actually getting out early? 'Cause I never get out early. Let's see. Oh, wow, we are. All right, rare. So don't forget, Monday I got you for class. Tuesday I do need you to read and be prepared. So finish your brief by Monday. And I will see you next week. Have a great week.
I was gonna say, when I was living in France, anyone who lived outside of the class, it's just like what you're asking, outside of this context, they do it. What I understood, where you live. So like, if you've been living in the same place for 10 years.
I don't think I should drink coffee in there. No. I'm so off. Where did Elizabeth go? Why she didn't call me back? What? Where did Elizabeth go? Why come she didn't call me back? I told you she was working on her brief. Wait, where did she go?
9 seconds from becoming a economics class.
Yeah.